Let's talk about a morning that looked ordinary, yet carried an extraordinary moment within it. She was walking, an ordinary morning, an ordinary day, but there was a rainbow of dreams hidden in her steps. In her hand were a few notes, her hopes for tomorrow. In her heart, a fearless kind of hope, and on her face, a smile that stayed even after enduring everything. But the moment she reached that desk, the whole atmosphere changed. The man sitting in front of her looked at her, and an ugly, disgusting laugh slipped from his lips and spread through the entire room. You? You'll translate. Listen, this wasn't just a question. It was that poisonous tone that has been hurting people for centuries, for their color, their caste, or anything that's seen as weakness. That tone wasn't rejecting the girl, it was rejecting her dream. The faces around the room showed a strange kind of curiosity, as if they were waiting for a free show to begin. They wanted to see what this weak voice would do now. The girl, she didn't make any noise. She stayed silent. She lowered her gaze, but that wasn't defeat. She just paused for a moment to breathe. That silence was the calm before a great storm. And then, in the next few seconds, something happened that changed the whole atmosphere. The girl spoke just one sentence. One sentence in a language so deep and beautiful that no one could have imagined it coming from her simple look, her skin color, or her background. That voice wasn't ordinary. It was the echo of ancient knowledge renewed through her lips. And suddenly, those laughing faces froze. Their laughter died right there, replaced by surprise, shame, and maybe for the first time, respect. The wall of prejudice that man had built with the support of centuries shattered with just one true sentence. That silence turned into a victorious cry. But wait, the story doesn't end here. This story isn't just about one sentence. It's about those powerful moments when walls of discrimination fall, when one voice turns silence into a scream. But I have a question for you, and it's the biggest one. Can one truth really break centuries of discrimination? Will this moment be remembered by the world? Or will the world move on again wearing its mask of indifference, as if nothing happened, as if that wall never fell? Maybe the answer is in your hands. This story teaches us that the greatest weapons we have are our knowledge and our voice.
Her name was Emily James, an ordinary name, but inside her lived an extraordinary soul. She was just a 20-year-old girl who woke up every morning with the innocent hope that maybe today would be better than the bitterness of yesterday. Emily worked at an old, quiet cafe in the city, a place where people came and went, but most of them passed by her as if she were part of the background, not a person. Standing behind the counter, she smiled, took orders, and repeated the same routine every day. If a customer ever made a sarcastic comment, Emily would quietly wear another smile. Why? Not because it didn't affect her, but because she knew that replying meant losing her job. And that job was her only ladder to her dreams. Emily's soul was in love with languages. As a child, when other kids played with dolls or toys, Emily looked at the old books filled with Chinese characters. She tried to find their meanings, their roots. For her, languages were not just a collection of words, they were her only way out of a small, limited world into one of freedom. Her dream was this. One day she would become a top translator. She would travel the world, go on journeys, and speak her true voice in places where no one cared about her skin color, where only skill mattered. But, reality is stubborn. It always stands like a hard wall in the path of dreams. In the city, racial division wasn't open, but it was definitely there. Most of the customers at the cafe looked at her with doubt when she took their orders, and when she spoke perfect, fluent English, soft, suppressed laughter often echoed around the room. That laughter reminded her every day, you don't belong here. That evening, too, everything was as usual. The sun was setting, and golden light from the windows was kissing the cafe floor. At that moment, a man walked in, wearing an expensive tailored suit, a costly watch, and with that same clean confidence that often comes from great power and wealth. Everyone recognized him instantly. He was a famous businessman in the city, often seen in TV interviews. He was the kind of man used to making decisions while sitting comfortably. He gave his order, but soon his attention fixed on Emily. He looked at her for a moment, then turned to his companions and said with a mocking smile, "You can speak Chinese or just make coffee." A small wave of laughter rippled through the room. But Emily stayed silent. She steadied herself and only said, "Sir, I'll bring your order right away." But now she had had enough. Something inside her was changing. A spark that after years of restraint, laughter, and being ignored was now turning into a flame. The moment looked ordinary, but it was the quiet beginning of something greater, the foundation of the next story. Emily's next word, her next breath, was about to become a statement that would silence not just that powerful man, but the entire room, and be remembered forever.
The next day, Emily arrived at the cafe earlier than usual. There was a strange heaviness in her steps, as if yesterday's mocking laughter was still echoing on the floor. She cleaned the counter, kept herself busy with the noise of the machines, but that taunt kept repeating in her mind. "You can speak Chinese or just make coffee." She knew that sentence wasn't just a joke. It was the echo of an age-old mindset, one that decides who stands where in this world. Around noon, that same man returned. This time, he wasn't alone. Two other men were with him, maybe business partners or the kind of people who form a wall of power around such men. Their faces didn't show confidence, they showed arrogance. As soon as they reached the counter, one of them burst into loud laughter. "Let's see today if she can understand what we're saying." Emily took a deep breath. She knew today she wouldn't wear the cloak of silence. Today, something was going to be different. One of the men spoke in Chinese, fast, sharp, filled with mockery and insult. The other laughed. "Did you get that? Maybe she only knows a few English words." Emily's hands trembled slightly, but her eyes were calm. That calmness, the kind that comes right before a great storm. She stayed silent for a few seconds, then slowly spoke in Chinese. Her words came out softly, but with clear dignity. And suddenly, the entire cafe fell silent. The three men looked at each other in shock, as if an unexpected truth had just shattered their wall of pride. Emily didn't stop. She answered their sentences, not with sarcasm, not with anger, but with clear, polite, and professional words. Her words felt like they were lifting the weight of centuries. Nearby customers started listening quietly. Some even took out their phones. The man who had laughed yesterday was now silent. His face showed that empty shock that drains a person from the inside.
Emily finished what she had to say and went back behind the counter. But the weight of the story hadn't disappeared. It had only changed direction. The three men looked at each other, still unable to believe that a coffee-making girl had spoken their language so fluently. For them, it wasn't just surprise. It was an unexpected defeat. But remember, sometimes defeat only makes the poison of prejudice grow deeper. A few moments later, the man stepped forward again. There was a forced smile on his face, but the same arrogance and pride in his eyes. "Oh, so you know Chinese? Impressive. Then tell me, if you're really that capable, come to my office, I'll give you a chance. If you succeed, I'll give your mother a job in my company." The words hit her like an arrow. When Emily heard her mother's name, her breath stopped for a moment. This wasn't just a challenge, it was an insult. He was trying to tie her words to her mother's need. She knew this wasn't an opportunity, it was a trap, a show. Emily took a deep breath. A battle raged inside her. Should she stay silent, as she always had, or should she fight for the generation that had always been called less? She looked straight into his eyes and said only one thing. "All right, I'll come." Then she went back to her work, but inside her heart, a quiet storm had already begun. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. From her mother's room came the sound of a faint cough, reminding her that this wasn't just her fight. She took out her old Chinese language notebooks, reviewed her notes, and looked at herself in the mirror. Tomorrow is your test, but this time the paper is about justice. The next morning, the city's sun was bright, but in Emily's heart there was a silent storm. She reached the office. The guard looked at her suspiciously, as if she had come to the wrong building. At the reception, the woman asked, "You're here for the interview?" Emily nodded, but her eyes were fixed straight on the conference room door. Inside, that same man was sitting with a file in his hand, a mocking smile on his face, and surrounded by the same partners who had been in the cafe yesterday. "So you came after all. Let's see if it's your skill that works today or just your skin color." Emily took a deep breath as she sat down. In front of her were the very people who had laughed at her existence, and today she was about to answer them in their own language. The clock ticked softly in the room. Time seemed to move slowly, every passing second carrying the promise of a great change. The first question came, in Chinese, complex, technical, and completely challenging. Emily closed her eyes for a few seconds, thought carefully, then began to speak. But as her words began to echo through the conference room, someone outside the door quietly stopped. And that moment was about to change everything that came next.
The room was so silent, it felt like time had stopped. Emily finished her first sentence, and the echo of her words was still bouncing off the walls. The faces of the three men sitting in front of her had lost all color. They were no longer smiling. They were listening. For the first time, they were truly listening to a voice that, until now, had always been unheard, unimportant to them. Question after question was asked, in Chinese, in English, filled with business terms, and Emily looked straight into their eyes and answered. With every answer, her voice grew stronger, as if years of silenced words were finally being set free. That man, the same one who had laughed yesterday, leaned forward in his chair, restless. "All right, you know the language, but do you even realize what it takes to reach our level?" Emily paused for a moment. It was a moment when she wasn't just translating words, she was translating her heart. "Yes, I do. Hard work, respect, and the right that people like you have often taken from us." The room's temperature seemed to drop suddenly. Everyone held their breath. She kept speaking about how she had faced criticism, how in every job interview her skin color had weighed more than her resume, and how her dream had been rejected again and again as a wrong fit. "For you, this is just a game, but for me, this is my existence." Her voice trembled, but her eyes showed no fear, only a pure, steady fire. And then she said the sentence, the one that carried the weight of centuries and changed the whole story. In fluent, dignified Chinese, "You think power lies in color, but language, knowledge, and humanity belong to no race." Silence. A few seconds that refused to pass.
The partners lowered their eyes, and the man, the one who had seemed like a king on a throne, for the first time looked human, helpless, empty, and maybe ashamed. Just then the door opened. Someone stepped in and said quietly, "Sir, the media is outside. Someone made the video go viral." That moment hit the room like lightning. Emily looked up, but said nothing. She didn't need to. She had already said everything. Now, the same man who had been the center of laughter yesterday was appearing on TV screens as the racist businessman who went viral. Sweat on his face, his voice shaking, he began giving explanations, but the world wasn't listening. The world had already heard the truth. Emily walked out the door. The sunlight was bright, but her heart felt calm. People were looking at her, some surprised, some inspired. But for her, this wasn't just a personal victory. It was the first step on the path to justice. She looked up at the sky, took a deep breath, and whispered in her heart, "Mom, maybe you didn't get the job. But today your daughter reminded them all, respect isn't given, it's earned. The door closed behind her. In the camera's frame, the sound of her footsteps echoed. And before the video ended, one final sentence appeared on the screen. Sometimes it's not a language, but the courage to speak the truth. That changes the world.
The sound of the office door closing echoed as if it had resounded across the whole world. Emily stepped outside, but the world was no longer the same. The street had the same noise, the same people, the same sky, yet something inside her had changed. Her steps were slow, but inside her heart there was an unusual stir. She knew that today was not just a day of conversation. It was the first chapter of a battle not fought with words, but with ideas, a battle whose weapon is not language, but conscience. When she reached home, her mother was sitting by the window. Her face showed fatigue, but her eyes held deep softness. Seeing the file in Emily's hand, she asked, "Did you succeed?" Emily smiled and replied, "Maybe not, but I spoke the truth." Her mother nodded slowly. "Then you have already won." Speaking the truth, that was the greatest victory. The next day, as the city woke, it stirred. The video had spread everywhere on social media. Black waitress speaks Chinese, racist boss silenced. It was the headline in every news outlet. People were surprised, inspired, and some were ashamed. Thousands of comments, millions of views. But behind every word, the same silent message. We saw wrong. We understood wrong. Some called Emily a hero. Some called her a rebel. But she wasn't looking for any title. All she wanted was that next time, someone would think twice before laughing at a girl's skin color. But the world doesn't change so quickly. Where some praised her, others said, "It's all drama. Everything nowadays is for social media." Emily read it all, but didn't reply. She knew truth takes time to root, but when it does, it lights up the entire forest. A few days later, she received a call from a major translation agency. "We saw your video. We need people like you who understand not just language, but dignity as well." Emily stayed silent for a moment and spoke softly, "I am ready." Entering the office, she saw her reflection in the glass door. She was no longer the girl who only made coffee. She was a voice, a symbol, reminding everyone that education, language, and courage are not the heritage of any single color.
In a corner of the city, that man was also there, whose face had now become the focus of media attention. His company had issued an apology, but he knew that apologies are not made with words. They are made with actions. He had lost, but the truth was that he had, for the first time, seen reality. Emily's life slowly returned to normal. But every time she passed a cafe and saw another girl standing behind the counter, she glimpsed her own past. She silently prayed that the girl wouldn't have to endure what she had endured. Time passed. Emily started her own YouTube channel, where she shared stories of people who couldn't speak against discrimination. Her first video was titled, "See Light, Not Color." And that video reached the hearts of millions. One day, a school invited her. Standing on the stage in a hall full of children, she said, "I don't just know the Chinese language. I know the language that speaks to every human heart. The language of respect, empathy, and equality. That is the language that can connect us all." The hall erupted in applause, but the effect of her words remained in the silence long after. Listen, the story does not end here. Because in every city, every street, every institution, there is some Emily. Someone who fights daily against their identity. Someone who works twice as hard to prove their worth.
just because their skin is different. Emily's story was a mirror for all of them, a reminder that racial discrimination is not just injustice, it is a habit. And habits do not change in a day. But if one voice has the courage to speak, silence can be broken. Finally, on the video screen appeared a simple sentence. This is not just a story, it is a mirror in which we need to see ourselves. In the background, Emily's determined voice could be heard. I am the girl you laughed at yesterday. Today, I am speaking and you are listening. This is not revenge, it is awakening. And as long as the world does not consider every human being equal, these stories will continue to be told. Her voice fades. The screen goes black. Only one sentence remains. Change does not start with a crowd. It starts with one person who refuses to stay silent.